Hello, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Mace, your host for today. We're looking at some crazy German laws. 6 surprising things that are forbidden in Germany. This video from Feli in Germany, shout out to them. I'll give my perspective as your friendly neighborhood amateur Canuck. If you don't know what Canuck means, that means Canadian. I don't know if it means Canadian. That's a nickname for Canadians. My favorite ice hockey team, or just hockey here in Canada, is the Vancouver Canucks, who are starting playoffs in just a couple of days. So pretty exciting stuff. Let's get into the video.
Common in the US, but illegal in Germany? Here are 6 crazy German laws that you should know about.
She's lived in Germany and I was back in the US. I need to clarify that.
Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio on and off since 2016. Now, whenever people here in the US find out that I'm German, they usually ask me a bunch of questions, and one thing that I get asked a lot is if Germans are really as obsessed with rules and laws as they're often portrayed. And my answer is usually, not every single German loves rules, of course, but yes, overall, following rules is definitely something that is valued a lot in Germany, and Germans like to have regulations and laws for almost everything. However, some of those laws can be really surprising and funny.
I think like as you get older and experience more things, you come to appreciate obviously certain rules and regulations because you see what happens when people are allowed to just run rampant and do whatever they want. People suck. So yeah, I'm interested to see what these particular laws are, but.
And that's why today I'll tell you guys about 6 crazy German laws. Now, of course, I'm not going to make you read any long, complicated, wordy laws in German in this video, but if you wanted to be able to read and understand those laws, I would recommend learning German on Babbel, which is today's sponsor. Since school has started again and the year is slowly coming to an end, I've been getting more and more messages from you guys asking about which is on the one of their newest.
Big shout out for her for getting the sponsorship. But
now, law number 1, it's illegal to run out of fuel on the Autobahn.
That's very interesting. Illegal to run out of fuel on the Autobahn. I mean, yeah, you're gonna cause a traffic hazard, so if you were to get onto the Autobahn and you looked at you're coming up to the Autobahn, you see that your fuel reserve is down to like 1/8 of a tank, and then you're just like, oh, well, I should be able to make it to the next gas station. You run out of gas? Yeah, you're stupid. Should it be illegal though? Let's see.
Most of you probably know the Autobahn is Germany's interstate system. If you want to learn more about it, you can check out these 2 videos. And when it comes to driving, there are indeed a lot of regulations that you have to follow as a driver in Germany. Like your car has to pass inspections every 2 years, called TÜV. Otherwise, you're not allowed to drive on the streets. You also have to have certain equipment, like a first
inspections every 2 years. Do you have to pay for the inspection as well? Because we definitely don't have that here. However, if you take your vehicle to auto shop and they deem that it's completely unsafe, then and you say, oh, that's too bad, I'm going to drive it anyways, they do have the right to call the police and report you, but they don't have, they can't ticket you or anything, obviously. But then the police are going to have your license plate and probably catch you.
First aid kit and warning vests in your car. And in the winter, it's mandatory to have winter tires on your car. And
same thing here. Well, in certain areas, you don't have to have winter tires if you're just in a coastal town and you're driving around. Like in my city here, you don't need to have winter tires, but there's certain highways that are at higher elevations. And if you are caught between the months of usually, I believe it's August, September, it's like October, I think, until March or April, October until April, something like that. If you don't have you have to have snow tires, or you have to have chains in the back of the vehicle to make sure that you can attach these chains if you're going to be running into snowfall, because They don't want accidents, and people without snow tires, especially if they're stupid drivers, are horrible.
Yes, you're also obligated to always have enough gas in your tank as a driver. And if you don't and actually run out of gas on the Autobahn, you can be fined and might have to pay 25 up to 120 euros, since this is considered preventable. And in general, it's also illegal to stop or park on the Autobahn, even in the emergency lane. I mean, unless your vehicle is actually breaking down, but even then,
Smart.
you won't see a lot of cars just left there on the side of the Autobahn. Whereas in the US, you regularly see broken down vehicles on the side of the interstate that were just basically parked there. And of course, since most places in the US don't use radar traps to enforce speed limits, but have cops pull people over instead, you'll often also see a car that was pulled over and also a cop car behind it in the emergency lane as well. On the German Autobahn, that would actually be considered jeopardizing the road safety, especially since on many parts of the Autobahn there is no speed limit, so people are going crazy fast. Fun fact, apparently this also became illegal in a small town here in Ohio earlier this year, in Youngstown, which is close to Cleveland, so don't do it there either. Number 2, it's not allowed to name your baby Superman. Now this one isn't technically a law and you won't get fined for this, but fact is, and this is usually hard to believe for Americans, that in Germany you can't just give your baby any name you want. It'll have to be approved by the local Standesamt, like the civil registration office, and there are rules as to what you can and can't name your kid. I mean, of course there are rules for that, it's Germany. We pretty much have a rule for everything. Now, whether the name you picked for your baby will be approved or not depends on different things, such as whether it's a name that actually exists, whether it'll be a reason for bullying later on in the child's life, and sometimes they also don't accept names that—
Did you say whether it exists and then whether or not the child might be bullied? Huh. That's like, somebody named, like, say their last name is Dick, and then their parents name them Harry. Harry Dick is they're gonna get picked on. Yeah, there's a lot of North American names that can get picked on. That's just the wrong names.
Different things, such as whether it's a name that actually exists, whether it'll be a reason for bullying later on in the child's life, and sometimes they also don't accept names that aren't obviously a female or a male name, which this last one is kind of ridiculous if you ask me. Here are just some examples of names that have been rejected before. Weidmann.
They're not gonna like that in our intersectional crap, like names that aren't, well, yeah.
Meister, Junge, which just means boy, Rosenherz, so rose heart, Bierstübe, so kind of like a beer pub, Satan, or Satan in German, McDonald's, Superman, Pain, Gucci, Whiskey, or the last names of politicians like Schröder, which was Germany's chancellor before Merkel, or Lenin. And since I already see all these question marks pop up in your guys' eyes, no, you won't be able to call your kid Hitler either, even though the first name Adolf is technically allowed. These rules are one of the reasons why you won't find a lot of crazy first names in Germany, and also why Germans are often very fast.
You said like Adolf is technically allowed. Is it still a name in use, or do people just steer clear of it? Let's just put that one to rest, because somebody
fascinated by what American celebrities name their kids. Number 3, deny the Holocaust. Now, this one doesn't necessarily fit into a list of crazy or funny laws, because I think it's neither of those. However, many people from outside of Germany and outside of Europe aren't aware of this and find it a very interesting law when they first hear about it. It's illegal in Germany to deny the Holocaust. So you can't just say that the crimes of the Holocaust didn't happen. If you do, you can either get fined for it, or you can actually get prison time of up to 5 years. Now, I've read many comments on the internet saying that this indicates that Germany doesn't have freedom of speech. Well, that's not true. We do have freedom of speech, Meinungsfreiheit, as a fundamental right in Germany. However, freedom of speech can be limited by other general laws, by provisions for the protection of young persons, Jugendschutzgesetz, and another person's right to personal honor. Those general laws, which are like the first example of what can limit your freedom of speech, cannot be laws that just discriminate against one specific opinion. They have to be neutral and they have to protect another legal right. In this case, the right that they're protecting is the dignity of the Holocaust victims and their families, which is something that we value very, very highly in Germany, because after World War II, when the Federal Republic of Germany was founded, the very first paragraph of our constitution, the Grundgesetz, became "Human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority." So that's why denying the Holocaust is illegal in Germany, even though we do have freedom of speech, and it's also illegal in 16 other countries. Number 4, it's forbidden to mow the lawn on Sundays or play piano at midnight. Germans like silence.
I feel like to play the piano, like you can play an electric piano though. Electric piano, playing like a real piano, really loud at midnight. I feel like if you lived in a house where nobody's going to hear it, then nobody cares. So I think it's kind of, let's just see how Feli is going to explain that. But
silence. This is something you'll notice if you're ever in Germany, especially if you come from a louder culture like the American one. Germans tend to speak pretty quietly, especially in public. And we also appreciate having...
I still remember, like, just because she mentions that, like a louder culture like the Americans. I remember this event when I was in Mexico one time, and we were taking a public transit bus to, a little town 30, 40 minutes away. And there was this American family that got on the bus, or they were already on the bus, I can't remember, but they were like a stereotypical, they were like a satirical cartoon. Like, you really thought it would be a skit. Like, it was pulled right out of a comedy skit, like stereotype. They were so arrogant. They were so rude. They had like Southern accents, and they were belittling the poor Mexican bus driver because he didn't have like perfect English. You're like, oh, I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? They really living up to the stereotype right now? It was horrible. Like, of course, all Americans are not like that. Like, that's, and it could have been people from any other country as well. But I just always remember that because they were so, and they had like American like shirts on, like American flag on their shirt and stuff like that. So it was a whole family, like a husband, a wife, and like 2 kids, and they were all being rude, especially the husband and wife. I was shocked, but not really, I guess.
Having some peace and quiet at home, which is why there are tons of laws and regulations about how much noise you're allowed to make and when. Sundays and public holidays have actually been defined as rest periods, Ruhezeiten, for the whole day, which means that you're not allowed to make loud noises that could disturb others. This includes mowing your lawn or using a drilling machine, for example. So if you were trying to do some renovations at home, not on Sundays. This also applies to nighttime rest periods, which usually start at 8 p.m. and sometimes even to lunch hours. The rules for the lunch hours usually vary though, depending on where in Germany you live, and some rules will even be made by the house management of your apartment building. The Federal High Court of Justice has even ruled that playing an instrument in rental apartments is only allowed at certain times, from 8 a.m. to noon and from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. And even then, you can only practice for a certain amount of time. Piano players only get up to 2 hours per day, and drummers, for example, get 45 minutes in the summer and 90 minutes in the winter. Yes, German laws are very specific. Number 5, it's not allowed to keep urns at home. This topic doesn't really come up a lot in conversations in everyday life, fortunately, but the Germans among you may have wondered about this when watching American movies before, because in the US, it's pretty common that after a loved one dies, you take the urn home with you. I've definitely seen this in movies and shows before where either it's...
Yeah, you usually see it in movies and shows, and they have it up on the mantelpiece, right? And then, like in a comedy film, there's gonna be some calamity happens, unfortunate turn of events, and the urn gets like smashed or something. I can also make reference to the classic scene from The Big Lebowski. If you haven't seen it, it's a great film by the Coens. And they go to spread the ashes of their fallen friend, or their friend who has died. And they go to the beach, and it's very windy. And the final wishes was to spread the ashes in the ocean. And they're standing there, and Walter, he goes on the edge of the rock over the cliffside, and he goes shaking the ashes out. And it's very windy, and they all blow in the wind into the friend's face, and like his whole beard is like oh man, it's bad, but it's hilarious.
It's part of a comedic moment because someone doesn't realize that it's an urn, or of course, it's part of a drama. Well, that's something that you won't ever see in Germany because we have a law called Friedhofszwang, cemetery compulsion, that says that any mortal remains have to be buried at a cemetery, or alternatively, after a cremation, you can have a sea burial in Germany as well. Now, in the past few years, the rules have been lifted a little in different states. In Bremen, for example, it's now allowed to spread ashes on privately owned property, but you're still not allowed to take the urn home with you. In general, there's pretty big differences when it comes to funerals and cemeteries in Germany and the US. I've actually had the topic on my list for a while, so let me know if you'd want me to talk about that more in depth at some point. And number 6, you'll be punished for saying "du" to a cop. Okay, those of you who speak German probably understand this law right away, but for everyone else, "du" is the German word for you. Now, why would that be a problem if you use that with a cop? Because in German, just like in other languages like French or Spanish, we have a formal and an informal address. So depending on what relationship you have with the person you're talking to, you'll use a different pronoun and also a different grammar structure when you talk to them. Du is the informal pronoun for you, while capital Z is the formal one. The formal one is usually used with people who are significantly older, strangers, people of authority, or just people that you have a professional relationship with. It really depends on the specific situation, but if it's not a child or someone you're close with, you usually don't use the informal address with them until you two allow each other to do so. Now, since police are people of authority and you speak to them in a professional context, you use the formal address with them, Sie. And if you don't, and use "du" with them instead, that can actually be viewed as insulting an official, Beamtenbeleidigung, because it's disrespectful and you may have to pay 600 euros for it. The actual fines are decided on a case-to-case basis, but this is one number I found. I also found that showing a cop the finger gets you up to 4,000 euros. Now, technically, insulting an official is just based on the general laws of not insulting others. There's no extra laws just about insulting officials.
You know, like, yeah, I don't know. Canada is totally different, obviously, when it comes to stuff like that, and the United States. It's definitely not smart, however, to give a police officer the finger. And it's just not polite. Like, I suppose it depends what the police officer did. There's a lot of bad cops. There's a lot of bad people. There's a lot of bad everything, no matter what profession it is. But at the same time, giving them the finger is not going to do you any favors. But there was a famous case in, I think, Ontario, where there were some school kids in the school bus. And out of the back of the school bus, they gave the police the finger. Or one of them did. And the police pulled over the van. And they, like, made it into a big scene and said they were gonna, I think they actually like arrested the kids. Anyways, the police officers got in a lot of trouble and it turned into a free speech issue, and it went to court, and the judge ruled that they have freedom of speech and freedom to give the police the finger. So it's not illegal, but not smart.
But I would assume that police enforce this much more than regular people do, so you should definitely be careful here. But also, I'm pretty sure that they would only enforce it if you obviously do it on purpose, and if they can tell that you're a non-native speaker and try to speak German with them and just make an honest mistake, I'm sure it's not a big deal. I have come across a few more very interesting German laws, like the ones about beekeeping, but maybe I'll mention those in the future at some point. For now, what other funny, crazy, or just surprising German laws have you heard of? Share them with me and everyone else in the comments below. And, of course, I have been thinking about also making a video about the craziest laws in the US. I'm sure that many of you have heard some examples of that because the US does have some very interesting laws. So if you'd like to see a video about those, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and of course subscribe to my channel.
I'm sure there's some that would shock people that think, oh, you know, freedom. We got so much freedom here. Our guns and everything. it's just idyllic. It's idyllic down here. And we're all about freedom and independence. But then there's like these laws that are super restrictive and anti-freedom, so I don't know.
Channel so that you don't miss it. As always, you can support my channel through the super thanks button underneath the video, by joining my Patreon.
Big shout out to her. Great video. Interesting. The one about the urns is interesting to me. I was wondering like I was kind of wondering more as to the purpose for a few of the laws. Like, what's the purpose of the urn one? The one about the Sundays and making noise makes sense because that's annoying if people are making excessive, stupid noise. And I don't know if neighbors just work things out themselves, if there's misunderstandings, or if there is an allowance for that. Like, say a neighbor is playing music a little bit too loud, and the neighbor just goes over, hey, can you just turn it down a tiny bit? We'd really appreciate it. And then they turn it down, and it's fine. You don't have to, like, call the police or something. So, yeah. Interesting stuff. The police officer ones. Yeah, I don't know. My opinion is you shouldn't do that. Should somebody have the right to do that? I don't know. And it's definitely not smart. It's impolite. And, I am always for as much civility as we can muster in our confrontations with each other and differences of opinions. We should try to talk things out and be civil with one another, even if we have disagreements with each other. Right? You should avoid, take the high road and do your best to resolve things amicably. But, you know how people are. All right. See you on the next video. Thanks for stopping by. Tschüss.